Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
I moved into the Whispering Pines subdivision with high hopes. The manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and cookie-cutter houses painted in various shades of beige promised a peaceful suburban life. Little did I realize I was stepping into a nightmare ruled by the iron fist of the Homeowners Association. The first red flag appeared just days after we settled in. I was outside enjoying the crisp autumn air and raking leaves when a stern-faced woman marched up my driveway. And then there was Karen. Every HOA has one. Karen was the president, and she ran the place like a wannabe dictator. She had the type of haircut that screamed, "I need to speak to the manager," and her tone matched her appearance. She introduced herself as Brenda, the HOA president. "You're using the wrong type of rake," she said, eyeing my tool with that trademark look of disdain she seemed to reserve just for me. Karen stood there, arms crossed, her clipboard clutched like it was some divine decree. "The bylaws clearly state only plastic rakes are allowed. Metal tines can damage the grass," she added, her tone dripping with condescension. She didn't even try to hide the judgment in her voice, as if my choice of rake was a personal affront to her carefully curated suburban paradise. I glanced down at the rake in my hand, a basic tool I'd been using for years without issue. The grass didn't seem to mind, but Karen was treating it like I'd set fire to the lawn. "It's a rake," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "I'm cleaning up leaves, not carving trenches." Her lips tightened into a thin, self-satisfied smile. "Rules are rules," she said, gesturing toward my driveway like she expected me to toss the offending rake out right then and there. "We have these bylaws for a reason. Metal tines can tear up the grass and ruin the uniformity of the lawns. You wouldn't want to be the reason the neighborhood looks unkempt, would you?" I stared at her, stunned. Of all the things to worry about, this was her hill to die on. "Unkempt, from a rake?" I muttered, more to myself than to her, but she heard me. "Exactly," she replied with a curt nod as if I'd just admitted guilt. "We expect all residents to take pride in their property, and that starts with following the rules. Please see that this is corrected immediately." She turned on her heel, clipboard tucked under her arm, and strode off like she'd just delivered some grand proclamation. I watched her go, my blood boiling, as she walked past a neighbor's overgrown hedge and a yard littered with toys without so much as a glance. But heaven forbid my rake didn't meet her standards. I blinked, confused. "But I've always used a metal rake, it works better." "Got it. Here's the extended dialogue based on your paragraph." Brenda's lips thinned. "Rules are rules. You have 24 hours to comply, or you'll face a fine." I raised an eyebrow, incredulous. "A fine for what exactly? Because I'm not sure what I'm even doing wrong here." She took a deep breath, looking at me like I was the one causing the problem. "It's in the bylaws, clearly stated. You should have read them when you moved in." "I read them," I shot back, frustration creeping into my voice. "I didn't see anything about." "Doesn't matter," she cut me off, her voice flat and cold. "The rules are there for a reason, and they apply to everyone whether you like it or not." I scoffed, crossing my arms. "Yeah, well, that's real convenient, isn't it? Pick the stupidest thing to fine me for, and now I have to just bend over and take it?" Brenda's gaze sharpened, her mouth tightening. "It's not about liking it, it's about maintaining order. If you don't fix it within the next 24 hours, we'll be forced to take action." "Take action? What does that even mean? Do you send me a bill for the fine? What if I don't pay it?" She gave me a look like I was asking stupid questions. "You'll pay, or we'll take it to collections. You'll be paying either way." I stared at her for a moment, then muttered, "Unbelievable." Without missing a beat, she said, "I'll be watching." And with that, she turned, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she walked away. That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I received citations for everything from having my garbage cans visible from the street, even on pickup day, to leaving my car in the driveway overnight instead of the garage. One Saturday morning, I woke to find a crew of landscapers tearing up my front yard. When I ran out to stop them, Brenda appeared, clipboard in hand. "Your grass was 0.25 inches too tall," she explained. "The HOA has the right to remedy violations at the homeowner's expense." I sputtered in disbelief. "But I mowed 2 days ago," she shrugged. "Not to regulation height. You'll receive the bill next week." The violations and fines kept piling up. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. The wreath on my front door was too festive for a non-holiday season. I even got a warning for leaving my curtains open past 9 p.m. as it disrupted the aesthetic cohesion of the neighborhood after dark. I tried to fight back, attending HOA meetings to voice my concerns, but I quickly realized I was outnumbered. The board members, led by Brenda, ruled with an iron fist. Any opposition was swiftly shut down. "If you don't like the rules," Brenda would say, her voice dripping with condescension, "you're free to move elsewhere." But moving wasn't an option. We'd sunk our life savings into this house, and the constant fines were draining our bank account. We were trapped. The final straw came when my daughter's 10th birthday rolled around. We planned a small backyard party with a few of her friends. I spent hours decorating, hanging streamers and balloons from the fence and setting up a small bounce house. Just as the first guests were arriving, Brenda stormed into our backyard, flanked by 2 other board members. "This is unacceptable," she declared. "Outdoor decorations require prior approval." "And that bounce house, absolutely not. It's a liability issue." I felt my blood boiling. "It's my daughter's birthday, for crying out loud. We're not hurting anyone." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Rules are rules. Dismantle everything immediately, or face a $500 fine." My daughter burst into tears. Her friends stood awkwardly by the gate, unsure whether to come in. I've never felt so helpless and angry in my life. That night, after a miserable party of cupcakes and board games in our living room, I sat at the kitchen table poring over our finances. The fines and remediation fees had eaten away at our savings. We were barely keeping our heads above water. I thought about our neighbors, the ones who'd lived here longer. They always seemed so perfect, their lawns immaculate, their houses like something out of a magazine. Now I understood why. They weren't happy, they were terrified. The next day, I ran into Tom, the guy who lived 2 doors down. He was meticulously trimming his hedges, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool weather. "Hey," I said, "doesn't it drive you crazy, all these rules, the constant threat of fines?" Tom glanced around nervously before responding in a low voice. "Of course it does, but what can we do? I've got too much invested in this place to leave now." That's when it hit me. We were all trapped in a cycle of misery, too afraid of losing our investment to speak up or leave. The perfect facade of Whispering Pines hid a community living in fear. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before. The way Mrs. Johnson across the street would rush to bring in her trash cans the moment the garbage truck left, even if she was in the middle of a phone call. How the Petersons' kids never played in their front yard, confined to the backyard where their laughter wouldn't disturb the peace. One evening, I overheard a heated argument from the house next door. Our neighbors, the Smiths, were fighting about paint colors for their shutters. "We can't afford another fine, John." Mrs. Smith's voice carried through the open window. "Just pick one of the approved colors and be done with it." "But they're all variations of beige," Mr. Smith shouted back. "I'm sick of living in a beige box." The argument ended with the sound of something shattering and a door slamming. The next day, I watched as Mr. Smith silently painted his shutters a HOA-approved shade of taupe. His jaw clenched the entire time. Weeks passed, and the pressure kept mounting. I found myself jumping at every knock on the door, terrified it was another surprise inspection or violation notice. My wife and I argued constantly, the stress of living under the HOA's thumb taking its toll on our marriage. One night, unable to sleep, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. The streets were eerily quiet, every house dark except for the occasional glow of a TV behind tightly closed curtains. It felt less like a community and more like a prison camp. As I rounded a corner, I spotted a moving truck parked in front of a house. The Johnsons, a young couple who'd moved in just 6 months ago, were loading boxes in the dead of night. "You're leaving," I whispered, not wanting to alert any nosy neighbors. Mrs. Johnson nodded, her eyes darting nervously. "We can't take it anymore. The fines, the rules, it's suffocating. We'd rather take the loss on the house than live another day like this." I watched them drive away, feeling a mix of envy and despair. They had found a way out, but at what cost? The next HOA meeting was particularly tense. Brenda announced a new set of regulations, including mandatory weekly inspections of every property and a beautification project that would require each homeowner to contribute $5,000. As the room erupted in angry murmurs, I stood up. "This is insane," I said, my voice shaking. "We're not your prisoners. We have rights." Brenda's eyes flashed dangerously. "Sit down or you'll be removed from the meeting. Anyone who doesn't like our policies is free to leave Whispering Pines." I looked around the room, hoping to see support from my neighbors. Instead, I saw fear and resignation. Even those who had been nodding along with my words quickly averted their eyes. Defeated, I sat down. The meeting continued as if nothing had happened. That night, I sat on my front porch staring at the perfectly manicured lawn I'd come to hate. A for sale sign stood in the yard next door where the Johnsons had lived. I wondered how long it would take for some unsuspecting family to buy it, lured in by the promise of suburban perfection. As the street lights flickered on, casting an artificial glow over the cookie-cutter houses, I realized the truth about Whispering Pines. It wasn't a community, it was a trap. A beautifully disguised, inescapable trap that we had all willingly walked into. I thought about putting up our own for sale sign, but the idea of trying to sell this house, of potentially trapping another family in this nightmare made me sick to my stomach. Besides, with all the fines and special assessments, we were underwater on our mortgage. We couldn't leave even if we wanted to. So here we are, stuck in our beige box, living under the watchful eye of Brenda and her HOA minions. Every day is a struggle to conform, to avoid fines, to maintain the illusion of perfection that Whispering Pines demands. Sometimes, late at night, I hear muffled arguments from nearby houses, or see lights flicking on and off as someone rushes to fix a violation before the morning inspection. And I know I'm not alone in my misery. But we all keep quiet. We all keep smiling and waving at our neighbors as we meticulously trim our lawns and paint our shutters the approved shades of beige. Because the alternative, admitting the truth and watching our property values plummet, is too terrifying to contemplate. So Whispering Pines continues its cycle. New families move in, dazzled by the pristine appearance and promises of a perfect community. And those of us who know the truth stay silent, our smiles as artificial as the chemically enhanced grass beneath our feet. Welcome to Whispering Pines, where the American dream comes with a hefty price tag and a soul-crushing set of rules. Enjoy your stay. You may never leave. I was actually told by our real estate agent not to say anything negative about our home and HOA. She indicated that any negativity would have to be disclosed to the potential buyer and possibly affect the sale. Since we needed to sell the home, we remained quiet. Finally, a post in this sub that actually comes from a place of logic. This is absolutely correct. People usually want out for negative reasons, and they do not eye those reasons to buyers, because why would they? One time, I was working for an HOA that was going to need a special assessment that would essentially triple everyone's cost of living. Every board member reached out to me privately to inquire about selling their home, and I had the joy of explaining that just because they knew about the SA before their neighbors, before it was official, didn't mean they weren't required to disclose it. I updated their community's questionnaire that same hour.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.